Welcome to part 2 of From Camera to Final Image.
What do I do at this point? I'm, for tonight's purposes, going to show you Topaz Denoise. I used to go into Photoshop and do all kinds of shenanigans to try and get rid of the noise. Topaz Denoise is like a new lease on life. But like I said, it takes forever to load and take care of raw files. It's good at it, but it takes a long time, especially when they're 30 to 40 megabytes. If I highlight all these that I did as a final and open them, so it opened those 15 images, those JPEGs. They've added this is the latest version of Denoise. They added a feature where you can compare their standard method of denoise, their clear method of denoise, their low light method, and their severe noise method, as well as a raw method. And what you do is you look at your original image and you pull it down to some area that gives you a close view. And I can use the navigator over here. And I can look at a little bigger. I don't know if I want to go to 200, but let me see if I can go up a little bit. Okay, 150. I'm looking at 150% size on a JPEG that I previously completed in Camera Raw. And for my purposes, in Instagram, they're perfectly fine because most images at 1920 by 1080 show as spectacular in Instagram because they also use their own compression algorithm, such as all of these people do, and it likes my images when I send it the way I did. But just to tell you how this goes, if you look at the clear, and it shows you that it's updated each of these, you try and make a decision as to which one you like best. And you can also select a specific one and make it your standard. And you'll see that in my first image, I selected standard. The rest were auto. You can let it do automatic. But my experience is that it kind of over sharpens. So I'm turning enhance down. I'm not going any higher in, much higher in the remove noise. And I do a little bit of color noise reduction. And when you look at these, look at his arms and see when it finishes updating, still working on the low light and severe noise and low. So until it has something you can really look at, it takes a minute to do the comparison. You don't have to do this all the time. You can just select the one up screen. I find that their standard method is pretty darn good. And if I don't over remove or over enhance, I'm good to go. Now what happens is I select all those images, and now I go down to the second one, and I say standard, and now all 16 or 15 of these images are going to have the same settings. And I'm going to save 14 images. It's still updating these ones, so it's taken a little while because I have so many programs. Okay. So you have a number of options when you save them. You can select JPEGs, different spelling, a TIFF, PNG, DNG. I leave it a JPEG because it's already a JPEG. I go to custom file name and I remove their suffix and prefix because they want to put a whole bunch of letters in there. I go to a custom location. And you can see from a previous choice that I had selected presentation, happy ending, baseball, Topaz. So I'm going to leave that the way it is. And then I just say start. So it is now applying its reduction and saving the images renamed according to the Topaz settings. It's pretty fast when you're doing JPEGs. We're up to 9. So at this point, it says all of them have been reprocessed. I'm going to remove them. I'm going to close the program. And I'm now going to go back into FastStone Editor. And I'm going to go to the Topaz folder. And I'm going to view these things full screen. I don't see any halos around anything. I believe it's not bad, but I think it's over-processed. I'm looking at the umpire's arm here, and I see veins, so I'm pretty good to go, but I still think I would prefer to use the JPEG versions. So I do have them, but I'm not going to use them. So I can process through these things and look at them all and see what it did. Usually I look at faces to see if the face is distorted, which means I put too much adjustment on it. But there are a whole bunch of settings in FastStone Editor that allow you to use a second monitor as well if you're viewing. So when we were using a projector, we could use the second monitor. In fact, I would be finished with the baseball ones in the early evening. And because I wanted to just show you what happens when you go to 12,800 ISO. I consider this low light at my highest ISO that I normally accept at 1,000th of a second because I didn't want to slow it down anymore because you want to catch the bat and the ball. And I was at 200 millimeter, and this was my f2.8 lens that I did turn to f4. I've got 78 images in here. And so what I would do is I just show you quickly how I'd go through and select This is a celebration of hitting the base before the first baseman caught it because he took his toe off the base. Okay, next guy, I selected from him. An outfielder caught the ball. A little discussion between the catcher and the pitcher. A new pitcher. Not often you can catch a ball on the bat, and that's only possible when you're shooting 20 frames a second. My fellow photographer there is shooting with a 7D Mark II, which was my earlier camera, at 12 frames a second, and he's lucky to get those shots. I also got one early in the season where I caught the guy hitting it and breaking the bat. And we caught the ball and the two pieces of the bat in the air. He actually ran to first base with the handle part of the bat before he realized he still had a hold of it. There's the second baseman. This guy fumbling the ball at second base. By the way, I'm shooting pictures primarily for these guys' competitors. So they love to see these faux pas from the opposing team. And after this, they're getting beat, so they're discussing their next strategy. And this is one of their pitchers. and the guy that dropped the ball. And this is my team. So you want to see that he missed the ball. Sometimes, after they rub the dirt into the ball, and the first pitch after, like this one hit the ground, when it hits the guy's mitt, a great big puff of dust comes out. And sometimes those are great images as well. Shot to first base, the guy's out. But they won the game. So now I've selected quite a few. I'm going to Control Delete, and I'm down to 31 images. I would click Select All, double click, and I'm in Camera Raw again. And you see my settings from the previous time? They're still there. So the nice part is it holds them even though it's not correct. I'm going to do the Auto key again to lighten it up. And I'm going to take down the lights, and I'm going to up the whites a little bit, up, and darken. Check my dehaze, or my masking, I should say. Get rid of some of the sharpening. You notice I turn the sharpening way down at 12,800 because I know it's going to be a problem, the pixelation. And I turn the noise reduction a little bit up. Make sure all my other settings are correct. Go over, select all the images, sync, choose crop, and apply it to all the images. Okay, they're all done. Now I go choose crop just to look at it. Go to the next image. Good. Next image. Oh, I need a little bit more. The ball got away. Next one. Needs to be a little taller. So you can see after a while, you get faster at doing this. So we're now getting dark at night here under the lights. Now, if I wanted to, since I still have all the rest of these selected, and I noticed at a certain point, I had this yellow overlay color. I would go up, and this is the white balance. And if I could select something in gray, and I do a draw across here, sometimes balances it well. In some cases, I have to take it out myself. So it removes the yellowish tinge to a point. And I'll never get it back to white because I'll be blown out. So I continue through. Toughest part of these images is trying to capture stuff as it's happening and get focus on it, because half the time I didn't know where to look. I don't play baseball, so it took me quite a while to get the hang of where to look. I'd be looking at first base and they'd be doing the home run thing. So I'm getting better at it, but as they say, time and experience. And the best part of the whole thing is I received notice from the players, because I was a new photographer, that they enjoyed the guy when I send my images to the fella, the other guy was doing photography, it goes on his page and they reference everything in his page. They were saying to him they loved the images I took from a different perspective, because I was a little higher on the first baseline. He was direct in the baseline. So I got some of that depth of field that he didn't have. And the end. Okay. Same scenario. Select the first one. Select them all. Save the images. And now that I've saved the ones before, because I'm working on them too, I have the same title, same location, starting at 16. Everything's the same. Click OK, and go. I have 31 images here that I can go. It's going to create JPEGs, and ultimately I end up with 200 to 300, which was an acceptable number from their perspective. Also, when I go through the JPEGs, I select each one in FastStone, and there might be some that look good when I was looking on here, but when I did full screen, I could see a little bit of out of focus. So I didn't want to include them. So I just delete them, and my numbers will go 1 through whatever, and with the odd one missing. I don't need to wait for this to finish because I'm not going to look at those. Just for your information, look at my ISO. 25,600. Would you believe that's possible? It is possible. Under the lights, I took a few hundred late in the day. It was 9:30 p.m. under the yellow lights, and I was able to shoot at 1,000. I have since gone to f2.8, which still shot at 25,600, but I was able to reduce to 12,800. If I just hit auto, you can see the pixelation. Straighten it, crop it. Here's the problem. See the pixelation, see his face. I'm not getting a whole lot of detail. Sometimes when I drop the dehaze, take out the detail, radius, and the sharpening, apply a lot of masking and noise reduction, both color and black and white. You kind of get some of it back. And if I was to save it, I only do one here just for the sake of time. So that's the last one I shot with 25,600. And I would definitely run that one through Topaz Denoise. I'm just going to delete this. Let's move on to birds in flight. I've got a bunch of images here, and because I'm only going to select a few, I'm going to say Control All, use my same method to reduce this down to a working number. And these are not my original raw images. I have them in various files elsewhere. So I'm going to select this one, those two, that one, and I'm going to delete the rest. So I selected 9 images. I'll double click on the first one. not what I wanted to show you. I wanted to select them all first, double click, so if I was taking this image, I saved it, but I said, wow, it's really dark. It's not going to do me any good. Then I started to play with it. Bring up my shadows, bring up my exposure, bring up my white, bring up my darks, crop. I have enough texture. I might need a little clarity, a little dehaze, not so much detail. My ISO is 2500, f14, 1/800th of a second. This was shot from my car window as we were driving by, and I was done for the night and heading home. And I just happened to look over and hadn't grabbed my camera. It was on my lap, and I grabbed it and I shot out the window. And he just took a quick look at me. So I said, "Oh boy, that's a lousy picture, but beggars can't be choosers." So I was able to get something out of this image. It's a little busy, got stuff in the background, not your perfect image. Am I going to apply everything here the same as the rest of the images? Do I think that's going to work? Let me click here, select all, sync an image. Not going to do crop this time. And then I go down one at a time and I look at these things. I go, wow, that's not correct. I reset auto and bring up, and the rest of the settings not too bad. So what I've gone from a 45 megapixel image to a 3.2 megapixel image. And I've got a few of them. I was going to show you the enhance mode, and we'll see if it's working tonight on these ones. I won't do a whole lot to fix these up beforehand because I don't think it would be working too well. Oh, he's over here. He's off the image. I'm going to drag him over. Okay, so I'm down to this guy. All I do is I press escape, and I'm back to my full image, although I'm at 17 because I was in crop mode on my camera, which gives me 1.6 times my focal length. I had a 200 millimeter lens, and I wasn't at full zoom, but I had 1.6 crop. Am I going to go back to this one and adjust it? Yes, I am. I hit auto again. Still not good. My whites are not too bad. My shadows, I could bring up a bit. My blacks, bring them up a bit. Take off clarity. Darken the background a bit. I'm at 6400 ISO, which is a good working ISO for this camera and lens. And that's not bad. So that one I look at. All right. This one was cropped incorrectly, and now I can adjust the crop, even though it's a little bit filled for the working image. And lighten it up a bit, bring up the blacks, bring down the highlights, and not too bad. Might even turn down the vibrance. So all in all, this one was ISO 2500. I'm just going to remove that, turn that down a bit. Okay. So if I wanted to take any of these and adjust something, this is the most important part. So I'm taking the brush, and everybody knows about dodge and burn. I'm going to reset. This is the reset function. So everything here is normal. My size of my brush and feathering, flow, and density have been set. I'm going to show you. Okay, so what you're looking at is the mask. I don't know if you can see it online here. And you can see the overlay with the dot. I'm going to turn the mask off, and now I'm going to adjust the exposure, the white. Nope, not too much. And I'm going to set sharpness, noise reduction, defringe, saturation a little bit. So this is, I don't know if you can see the adjustment that was made there. This is before, this is after. Just a marginal setting. And if I wanted to reduce the size of that, if I wanted to put a vignette on here, I normally do it in Photoshop, but I now know that I can put setting out here and I'm going to reset it. Okay, so the setting is there. Okay, I'm going to take the invert off and take my brush, and this is the global setting. I'm going to upsize my brush with the right bracket key, and I'm going to turn exposure down. Okay, so I'm actually applying somewhat of, oops. So this would be considered a faux vignette. And if I showed you the before and after, here's my before. Before, after. And if it's too much, I can slide it up a little bit. We can turn the highlights down a bit. I can turn the blacks down a bit. And if you fool around with this a little bit, you can effectively do this right in Camera Raw. In this case, what do I want? So brighten the eyes. Go back to my basic settings. Auto. Highlights I'm turning down. Blacks I'm turning up. So if I wanted to apply sharpening on this guy, I can set a radial filter. I'll set it to 0. I need to show the overlay. Let me get rid of that and start with another one. I add texture to him, sharpen, reduce noise, and that's probably about it. So before, after, before, after. That one is hard for you guys to see. In essence, what I've done is I've done multiple different images, and I would, in this case, would I save this? Probably not. Let me see if I can take these guys, select them, save them. Now I'm going to call it Hummingbird and 001. I'm going to select a new folder. Yes. I'm going to presentation, birds in flight, JPEG, select it, save. Each and every one of these things, you can apply vignette, you can apply graduated filters. It takes a little while. I don't think we have time to do all that, but I've saved those 4 already. This one and this one, I'm going to save in the same location, but golden eagle. And I won't change the numbers. I've gone through share and it's trying to generate the changes that I made to these guys because it shows, and up in the right hand corner it shows that I cropped it and there's been basic adjustments to it. You can see that they're a little pixelated. If I go to the JPEGs, not too bad, but here's a perfect spot for denoise. Go to my presentation, birds in flight, JPEG, select them all, open. So it's looking at my first one and it selected low light as the automatic mode. And the rest it's going to look at automatically and make its own adjustments based on what it thinks to be true. And if I was to look up at the head on this guy and review what it's done in terms of removing noise and enhancing sharpness, I think the program is so good. It's just not hard to believe. And because I like it so much, I'm going to just accept what it said to save these images. I'm not even going to look at the other images. I'm going to leave them as JPEGs. I'm not going to save this. Custom. I'm not putting any. I'm going to leave the names that are on them. And custom location. Change that to sit alongside the others. Birds in flight. Topaz file. Select the folder. Save. Come on, Denoise. Don't do the same thing as the other file did. My fault. It was asking me to answer a question up in the corner here. I'm overwriting a file with the same name. Well, take that one off. So in this case, it's selecting each one of these, looking at it, loading it, looking at it, deciding what it should have done, and doing an automatic setting on it that I haven't adjusted. So you see each of these images has a slightly different setting. I found it incredible that this software is actually able to do that. Now, I'm not saying they're all perfect, but when you start to feel comfortable with the way a certain setting is on these things and you let it do its thing, it is rewarding, especially when you're doing multiple attempts at images. So trying to decide what your favorite software is a daunting task these days and can be all time consuming. I know everybody loves a certain thing. JPEGs, in short, copy your originals to a safe location, in some cases, 2 locations. I'm going to remove all of these. And I'm going to open FastStone. And I'm looking down at Birds in Flight and Topaz. So look at that. Look at that golden eagle. Look at the detail and virtually no halo, and all the pixelation in the background is gone. Let's look at this one. I know this is very busy, but I would never put this in competition, this particular picture, but to put it anywhere to show people the birds you've taken pictures of, people love it, especially on Facebook. Well, look how it handled my hummingbirds. You know what's hanging from his claws down there? It's a piece of a spider web. And I love the color that I got on these things. This was shot at 1/4000th of a second. His tongue's sticking out. He actually was on this flower, which I couldn't get a good focus on, but I almost got a focus on the bug that was in the spider web. The detail is incredible, and I love what it does to the original picture. So I start with full image count, whether it be 500 or 5,000. I reduce it to 100 or so select images, depending on how good or bad they are. Now, one of the things being that a single button press on my camera at 20 frames a second produces 3 images. And you might think that's 3 duplicates. If you're doing birds in flight, especially at 1/4000th of a second, that's 3 different images. If you press and hold longer, you get a lot more images, but when you get good at looking through the images, you quickly pick the ones you like. In some cases, I just delete them all and say, it'll be another day. Sometimes when we're walking and I have my 1:500 lens on with a 2 times extender, you'll see I can shoot broad daylight, 1/320th of a second, f14, ISO 1600 at 1000 millimeter. I'm about 4 feet away from this guy. And it's pretty darn good. That's an RF lens. And if I was going to keep any of these, I'd probably keep a couple of these. So I've got some great detail in there. And these were already JPEGs, so they opened in Photoshop because they're JPEGs. And I've told my system to open JPEGs in Photoshop. The nice part about working with images in Photoshop and the filters is that our Camera Raw filter is actually accessible from Photoshop as a filter. So it takes your image into Camera Raw, and you can apply other settings. And it might not be the best, but it certainly gives you a lot of freedom. You can up the texture. There's a lot of things you can sharpen. It doesn't give you a crop tool. There's no crop tool when you go as a filter from within Photoshop. And you can reduce noise. You can't recrop it here. So when I say OK, it goes back. Generally, when I do that, I don't do it as a background layer. Control J makes a duplicate layer. I can also go to Topaz, and this Topaz Sharpen AI is an original copy. It's not as good as the new one, so I don't use it. But the Topaz Denoise is the newest one, and the Studio is a full studio, and it has a whole bunch of other options. I also have Luminar and an older version of On One. I haven't used either of those two in months, but one of the things that you can do is, if I consider this to be my finished product, I just selected the background on a separate layer, did a stroke. I'm selecting a lighter green color from the palette, and I'm giving it a 15 pixel stroke. So you can see the stroke that it's too thick, but you get the example. The other thing, let me show you one thing that's kind of interesting. It might be delving a little bit deep. When you're using channels and you select channels, there's a red channel, a green channel, a blue channel. You can work with different channels depending on how much detail you have in that channel. And you can actually extract greater detail in your overall color by using one of the channels and producing an additional copy of it. And also, if you had color that was overly bright, when you're in your layers and you click select on the image, it selects the entire image. That was a control click. I'm going to Control D to get rid of that. But if I go to the channel and I do the same thing, you can see it selects a different image. And what it's selecting is the white points in that image. And I can go back to my layers and I can actually apply an adjustment like curves. And what it does is that produced a selection that is now a mask. And because the mask is light and dark, my adjustments are less. I can darken the darks without affecting the lights. And if I lighten the lights, it only works on the lights. Because when you have a mask, and I'll Alt select the mask, any adjustments I put on that, clip it to that layer, any adjustments on that, it does less of an adjustment on the dark stuff and more adjustment on the white. It shows the white and not the dark. If you still wanted to do something different, you can add a black and white to the image. And sometimes if you darken the colors, you can make yourself a great black and white image just by modifying some of the existing colors. Okay, what I did was I just made a stamped copy of the black and white on the colored image. And now I'm going to go over and I'm going to select a subject. And if you turn it to black and white and give it more detail, oftentimes it does a fantastic job of selecting your subject. Adobe Camera Raw has now improved sufficiently that 90% of the images that I would work on, I can do without going into Photoshop with excellent results. If I'm turning them into something for competition, I've even done it where I've taken a great image, done my adjustments to it in Camera Raw, and only used Photoshop to increase the size to 2 foot by 4 foot to do a print. I'm going to close Photoshop. Oh, this bridge, listings by quality, 1 to 5 stars. You can click on it, change your images. You can select them all and do a major renaming of all your files if you got them in your final mode, just by clicking on the bottom and selecting them all. And something I forgot to show you was Camera Raw will do HDR, it will do pano, stitching pano, it will do high res. Okay, so my original image and my night image. You can see that the lights were too bright. This one and this one. Yeah, I think those were the two. So if you select the two and you say merge to HDR, it aligns the images, applies auto settings, and does deghosting to a high level. I can show the overlay that it used from the one image to the other image. And I can say merge. It comes up with an image and you just save it. That's the resulting image. And the resulting image can now be correctly modified. Some HDR that doesn't look overly HDR can now be correctly modified. And it got rid of my ghost in the front, which was a reflection of, I think, my hand in front of the lens. I ended up with a pretty good end result. And I just say done. And I can save it to a JPEG. And you can see I played around with a few of them here. And that's my HDR that I just did because I did one previously. in my computer, I have my main drive. I have a RAID drive that I use today for my first download. This is my second that I was showing you tonight, where I reduced the 100 pictures to a half a dozen and produced JPEGs and Topaz. When I'm finished with that, I will move everything over to my D drive to save the space in my solid state drive. And this one is full, so I can't do much with that. These are network drives, known as NAS drives. I have 4 terabytes and 8 terabytes, RAID 10, which gives me 4 drives of redundancy. And this one is a Western Digital. It's 2 drives, so I can only get, I think, RAID 5. Well, this is vacation images and stuff that I am going to keep for long term, so I don't look at it again. You know, my underwater videos that I did, Cozumel, Roatan, and things like that, and our European trips, because I had a lot of storage. So I moved them out of the working drives and into the historicals. When I'm out on a trip, when I have a laptop, I use a 4 terabyte drive that I connect on one side of my laptop through a USB 3, and I have a USB switch that has 4 ports on it that I connect my camera to on the other side, and I unfortunately have to transfer from the camera to across the laptop to the hard drive. That is agonizingly slow, but it's the fastest I've got until now. Now that I have Compact Flash Express, this will connect to my USB 3 on the other side of my laptop and be much faster to go to the hard drive.
Well, folks, that's it in a nutshell. Thank you for watching From Camera to Final Images by Larry Mathewson.